Hey Sam, I just I thought this might be a little quicker if I just kind of walk you through how to do this with SPSS. I'm only familiar with SPSS. I know there are a couple other programs, but this is the most prominent one that I've ever used. So basically, I just opened it up, SPSS, and you're going to open up a new data set. You're just going to type in the data, which is going to be very similar to your Excel spreadsheet that you sent me. And let's see here. So the first thing you need to do is come up down here to the variable view, and we're going to come up with a couple of variables here. We're going to call the first one group, and this is a nominal measure, meaning it's no, there's um, it's just a descriptive measure because we're going to give them group number one or group number two. Um, let's see, and then we're going to do the MSLQ, and this is actually scale. We'll call the next one TLX for the cognitive load stuff. This is also a scale, and then we'll say post-test for the last variable here, also a scale. And so when you go back to the data view, you switch back down to data, you'll see that these are all the columns here. And let's see, we've got um, 15, 17, 19, 21, 22, 24, 26, 28, 31. Sorry, I just wanted to double check that. So we'll call, uh, let's see. Let's call the treatment. Let's call them group number one. And I guess I could just do it like this. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm just kind of walking through this as I go. Yeah, let's call the treatment group number one. So let's see, we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 33. So I'm going to say 33 of these, group one, and then just remember that we're saying group one is going to be the treatment. Group two will be our control. Sorry, did I just... 32, right? Okay. And then 31 of the control group. I guess I can fill this in later. Okay, so the MSLQ. Let's see, I'm just going to take your scores. Hopefully it's going to let me copy and paste. I think it does. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Take our TLX score. That's also there. And then, jeez, sorry. I'm confusing myself here. And then do the same for group two, which we're going to use, we're going to say control is group two. I mean, I guess if you really wanted to, you could switch the group numbers, but it doesn't really matter, just as long as you keep it consistent. test score. All right, and then let me just fill this in. Okay, so there we have it. This is your data set, your basic data set here. Let me just run through a couple of things with you in SPSS. If you go to, let's see here. If you click on Analyze, which unfortunately is just out of the reach of the screen here, but I went to Analyze, Compare Means, and you can go to Independent Samples t-test. And we want to use the group as the grouping variable, and we want to say group 1 and group 2. So I just click Define Groups, group 1, group 2. And then we're just going to go ahead and put all three of our dependent variables in here. That looks fine. Just run it. We'll say OK, and you're going to see the SPSS output here. And we're going to cross our fingers for significance. So obviously we're looking for anything under 0.05, and it would be right here. So I don't see right away, I don't see any significance here. So let me see here. It's surprising. Yeah, I mean, it's if this were a significant finding, it would be less than 0.05. But as you can see here, they're actually pretty strongly correlated. And it actually just gives you an output up here. You can look at the mean scores between the two groups on each of the dependent variables. So MSLQ, we wouldn't expect there to really be any difference there. That's fine. Cognitive load, that kind of surprises me that there's no difference reported there. And then post-test, there's hardly any difference at all. That's extremely close right there between those two. So unfortunately, no blue ribbon here right off the bat. So that just means we'll have to work a little harder to find it. And so one thing that I thought about doing, which was one of the research questions did say that we were dividing them into high and low self-regulators. So that could possibly get us something. And we can look at it that way. Of course, to do that, you have to figure out what the mean score is. So out of all of the scores here, I guess we could just kind of figure this out. It's been a while since I've used Excel in this way, so it's not what we want, huh? Yeah, that's what we want. Okay, so this is your average score. Interesting. Okay, well, we could look at it this way. I mean, you could say, here's the cutoff that we're using, 5.26. So therefore, just ignoring the, well, no, we can't ignore the group, can we? Well, so within each of the two groups, see, that's not going to work, is it? So we're going to have to do it by group. So you would have to say, here's our cutoff for the treatment group, those who received the treatment. Of those participants, the cutoff, the median cutoff was 5.22. Anybody above that cutoff would be considered a high regulator. Anybody below that cutoff would be considered a low regulator. So what you could do, and this is where it gets kind of hairy, I mean, you could say group, since we're calling the treatment group group 1, you could say group 1.1 equals the high self-regulators. Oops. Oh. See it. I told you I'm okay. Group 1.2 would be low self-regulators. And so just like we did in SPSS with just the regular groups, you could then further divide it into something like, well, we could call it high-low, I guess. And again, it would be a scale. I'm sorry, it'd be nominal because we're just giving them an arbitrary name here. And so what you could do, you've got high and low here. Of this section right here, of these participants, they would be either 1.2 or 1.1, 1.2, 1.2. So whatever group they end up being in, right? And so then you would just want to run those same tests. Let's just do this real quick. One point two, 1.1, 1.1. So you sort of get the idea. You're just categorizing these into their groups. And then you would want to run the same test. You could do an independent samples t-test, except for the grouping variable, you'd want to use the one that we just made up. And so you would say that. And your groups would be 1.1 and 1.2. And it should do it, but it's not going to give us very many participants because I didn't plug in that many groups. So yeah, I only plugged in a total of 12 groups there. Let's see. So just doing that, just messing around, you can see that like with the cognitive load, it's getting down much further. It's getting down to 0.129 now, which still is pretty far off from significance. But I think if you look at categorizing them all the way into those groups, all the way down here to the 33rd participant here, then you might have significance. And then, of course, you could do the same thing for the control group, which means you would also categorize the control group into their own subcategories. In the control group, there would either be high regulator or low regulator. And so that's another way to do that. So that's the high and low regulator stuff. I'm trying to think here. I think where you might have the most luck though is, I'm just gonna get out of this, is looking at the question types. And I was looking back at the paper and we said in here that we were going to be dividing the questions up 5, 5, and 5. So 5 recall, 5 comprehension, and 5 application maybe. Let's see if it's still, I just read it. Here we go. Yeah, so we said 15 question, and okay, 5 recall, 5 comprehension, 5 application. So this though was back when we were doing the DSLR unit. So I'm not sure if you kept that with the new transportation unit, if you kept the levels in the test, but that would come in handy quite a bit because then we could look at you'd have to code it a little more, like in your spreadsheet here. You have to actually divide it further into um, recall items, and you can look at maybe their percentage. So like there were 5 recall items. If they got 4 out of 5, that would be an 80. So then it would be you literally put 80 here. If they got 5 out of 5, it'd be a 100. If they got 1 out of 5, it's a 20. So you can look at it in terms of that, and so you would have like this. So you'd actually have to break out these test scores a little further into their subcategories, and that's if you still had them set up in these levels. But I mean, I've had success with that in both of my studies that I did. That's where I really found a lot of success, and then I actually found a lot of research that backed it up, saying that yes, indeed, it works for lower level but not higher level stuff. So, or vice versa. So that's another option. So I guess from here, let me know. Um, and also, I think, are you still doing the attitude survey? Because I saw that in here. But was that where they weren't, or no, that was the cognitive load survey that they weren't filling out all the way? Um, so really, if you have the attitude survey, you can look at that here. Also what you can do is you can look at the TLX. You can look at it by question. So um, you can actually compare scores on specific questions in the thing. So there's a question on performance, there's a question on frustration, effort, and what you might find is that between the two groups there is a difference on something like frustration. Um, but it's kind of surprising to me that there was no difference um, in the cognitive load. Hmm. Well, I guess another approach too, what you could do is you could look at the TLX. It looks like you may have averaged like all of their scores. So for example, like this person, out of all of the items on the TLX, they averaged a 28. But you could also look at it in terms of a total. So you could look at all of the items on the TLX and add all of them up. So add all their scores together and they have a total score rather than an average score. I think by averaging those scores, it's going to obviously it's going to average things and it's going to pull things a lot closer, and it's going to make it much more difficult to see significant difference. So um, possibly think about doing it that way. I know when I was really digging through my data, I think I probably spent the majority of my time. It was probably 90% of my time actually like coding the data and counting the data and pulling all the data apart and putting in a giant spreadsheet. And I mean, I must have 40 columns of data because I was breaking things down into everything. And then, so 90% of my time was spent doing that. And then like 10% was actually spent just running the test. Like you saw how quickly we just ran that test. I mean, it's really just a matter of like, a couple of clicks to run it and, um, just define the groups as 1 and 2, and it takes like 10 seconds to actually run the test. So I think the real bread and butter for the study and what makes it difficult is actually picking apart those scores a little bit more and looking at it that way. Also, even with the comprehension post test, I know one thing I did was I looked at it as an average, or I'm sorry, not an average, but on a scale of 100. So even though it was a 15 question test for me, I took whatever score they got and divided by 15. So if they got 11 correct, their score would be 73%. So you would just, in that box, you would just put 73. If they got 9 out of 15 correct, that's a 60, So then in the box itself, you would just or in the sheet itself, it would be a 73 and a 60, and so again, your data is much more spread apart, and it's much more easy to detect differences when you do it that way, um, rather than just uh, doing it on such a small scale or averaging all of the numbers. Because when you do that, um, that's the point of averaging, is it kind of ignores the outliers, but um, we don't want to ignore them. So uh, I guess that's my advice at this point. So I guess from here going forward, for the next few days at least, try and try and take that data a little further. Not necessarily with this one, not with the MSLQ. We don't really need that. That is kind of what it is. Although you could consider looking at that as a total score, I suppose. But that doesn't really. I mean, that's not going to be affected. That's an independent variable. Um, these, however, are dependent variables, and so uh, you could actually pick these apart a little further. Like you could break this into the types of questions. You could break this into each individual question. You could also look at it as a total score rather than an average score. And same thing here. Instead of looking at it as a 7 out of 15 or a 9, you would do an percentage, so a 73 or a 60, so out of 100 scale. I mean, I guess, at some point there is a point where we can pick pick way too much, and then it becomes a little sketchy. But I don't think this is out of bounds here to look at it. Um, to look at it like this in terms of a total score, or out of 100%. Saying it that way, I think that's perfectly fine. So um, why don't we try and elaborate on the data just a little bit more, and then we can probably find some more significance here as we do that. So just let me know what you think. Let me know what uh, kind of questions you have, and if you can get access to SPSS or not. Or it looks like you can, so that's good. But I'll be in touch, and sorry for such a long rant for a video here, but I thought it might be a little better than trying to type you an email or something. So that should be it. Oh, unfortunately, I am going to be in Norfolk on Wednesday, but I'm coming straight home afterwards. So I'd love to stick around and meet up with you, but I'm hoping to be done by about 1 o'clock, and then head back home. It's about a 6-hour drive, so just ready to be done. So yeah, if you can make it, that'd be great. We can talk. Otherwise, we can keep doing stuff like this and keep connecting, and let's get you through it. So that's it. I'll talk to you soon, Sam. Bye.